Chapter 13. Chance. Chance tried not to limp as he walked beside Merribeth into the resort, but his legs still throbbed from his fall yesterday. The pain didn't flare up often, but when it did, it was hard to think about anything other than the heat that licked up and down his leg. As he rubbed a hand down his thigh, his movement caught Merribeth's attention, and she turned discerning eyes on him. "Are you okay?" He should just tell her the truth. After all, she had told him about her ex, and she had those eagle eyes about her. She'd always known when something was wrong, and she would no doubt see through his facade this time as well. But he couldn't tell her yet. He knew that the way she looked at him would change as soon as she knew about his injury. It had for everyone else, and he needed her forgiveness before her pity. "It's nothing. I just slept on it wrong is all." She narrowed her gaze at him, and he could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. But she said nothing more. A moment later, they reached the front entrance, and he pulled the door open for her. The security office was on the first floor, nestled far back in the corner, and manned by a large man who went by the name of Dougie. Chance had heard that the nickname was based on his last name of Douglas, but he had yet to officially meet the man. He'd also heard the man was a big teddy bear, but when he entered the office and Dougie stood, he found himself pausing mid-step. The man was huge. Chance was no small man, standing at 6'1" and weighing just under 200 pounds, but Dougie had to be at least 3 inches taller and 40 pounds heavier. However, it was clear every inch of the man was pure muscle. "Hey, Merribeth, what brings you down my way?" Dougie's voice was as smooth as his chocolatey skin, and the white of his teeth only made his smile even brighter. It was obvious from the way he looked at Merribeth that he held her in high esteem, which didn't surprise Chance in the least, but did increase the guilt he was already battling for his treatment of her. Merribeth's smile appeared forced, but her voice held the same sweet melody it always did. "Hey, Dougie, I don't know if you've met Chance yet, but he's the new manager here." Chance wouldn't have thought it possible, but Dougie appeared to stand up a little straighter as his eyes flicked to Chance. "Yes, sir. Nice to meet you. I'm sorry I haven't made it to your office yet." "I should be the one apologizing," Chance said with a shake of his head. "I wanted to meet everyone in my first few days, but it's been a little busy." A deep chuckle spilled out of Dougie's lips as he nodded. "It's a big place for sure, but I am glad to meet you. However, I somehow doubt you came all the way down here just to say hello." "No, I'm afraid we didn't." Chance turned to Merribeth. Though he was the one who had suggested this, it was really her story to tell, but she looked like sharing it was the last thing she wanted to do. Dougie's eyes shifted between them as the silence grew heavier. Finally, Merribeth sucked in a deep breath and began. "Yesterday, my daycare provider told me that some guy was watching Lucas play. She doesn't know what my ex looks like, but I'm worried that he may be back in the picture." Dougie's face hardened into a fiercely protective expression, but Merribeth wasn't quite done. "Then, last night, my car broke down on the way home. I don't think that had anything to do with Colin, but Chance happened upon us and gave us a ride home. This morning, he had a flat tire. It could be purely coincidental, but Chance wanted me to give you his description so you could keep an eye out for him." "I think that all sounds too coincidental, Merribeth, and I agree with Chance here. Better to be safe than sorry." He grabbed a pen and paper from the top of his desk and turned expectant eyes to Merribeth. "You give me his description, and I'll make sure everyone knows to watch out for him." "I'm not sure how much a description will help. He's pretty ordinary. Tall," she glanced at Chance, "about an inch shorter than Chance. Brown hair, brown eyes, no distinguishing features. But I do have an old picture back at my place. Maybe we can swing by at lunch and pick it up?" She posed the question at Chance, and he found himself nodding before he had completely processed her request. Yeah, we can do that. We need to see about your car anyway. Okay, I've got this down. You bring me back that picture, Merribeth, and we'll make sure we keep an eye out. Thanks, Dougie. I appreciate it. We're family here. That's what we do. He said the words at Merribeth, but he shot a pointed look at Chance as well, as if indicating it was his job to look out for Merribeth as well. Chance didn't need the reminder. He had failed Merribeth once, and he was determined not to do it again. I think that was highly unnecessary, Merribeth said as they left the security office. Maybe, but what if it is Colin? Won't you feel better knowing that if he does come after you, that people are watching out for you? She looked up at him, questions brimming in her bright blue eyes. Would you do this for any employee, Chance? Or is this because it's me? The question hurt him, but he could understand it. After all, she had never questioned his motives until he gave her a reason to. Now that I'm the manager, the safety of every employee is my priority, but I won't deny that it feels more urgent because it's you. As she held his gaze, he wished he could read her mind. She had said they needed to forget their past, but he was finding that hard to do, especially as the need to protect her burned within him. We should get to work, she said, after stretching the moment out another second or two. If we're taking an extended lunch today, we'll need to be focused to get everything done before the Christmas parade. It's only a week away. Right. Work. Maybe he had made a mistake in hiring Merribeth to be his assistant. Because while he knew his focus should be on the upcoming parade, it was almost entirely focused on the feisty woman who now led the way to his office. Maybe he could give her an assignment that would keep her out of sight for a few hours. Out of sight meant out of mind, right? Even as the thought entered his mind, he rolled his eyes at the absurdity of it. Whoever had made that claim had not had Merribeth Martin on their mind. Chance was surprised when the rumbling of his stomach told him it was lunchtime 3 hours later. Somehow he had managed to get engrossed enough in work to forget about watching the clock in the chance that Merribeth's ex would make an appearance. He glanced up at the knock on his doorframe. Merribeth offered a thin smile and lifted her eyebrows. I verified all the floats for the parade, and it appears we are good to go. Also, my stomach is hinting that it might be nearing lunchtime. Do you want to eat or run errands first? Normally, he would have said errands first. He hated feeling rushed to eat, but the rumbling of his own stomach, coupled with the throbbing pain in his leg, told him food should probably be their first stop. He needed to pop a few painkillers, and they always wreaked havoc in his body if he took them on an empty stomach. Lunch sounds good. How about we go to this restaurant I've been hearing about? Maples or something? The color drained from her face, as if he'd mentioned eating her favorite pet instead of trying a new restaurant, and she shook her head. No, I've heard that place is always busy at lunch. Long wait times. With everything we have to do, we should pick a place that will serve us faster. He narrowed his eyes at her, wondering what the real story was. But in all reality, it didn't matter to him where they ate. Just getting to spend time with her and make sure she was safe was all that mattered to him. Okay, well, you know the town better than I do now. Where do you suggest? There is a really good deli downtown. Not only is the food good, but you can usually get in and out in under half an hour. Sounds good. Let's go. The deli turned out to be a good choice. Though it was hopping, the line moved quickly, and they were sitting at a table with their food in under 10 minutes. Chance bowed his head to say grace, and was surprised to see Merribeth staring at him when he finished. What, you don't say grace anymore? Of course I do. I just didn't know you still did. It seemed you were lost the last time we spoke. Chance's mind wandered back to their last few conversations. He had been lost, or at least questioning his faith. Church for him had mainly been something his parents dragged him to every Sunday. Oh, he believed in God, but he didn't really want to change his life or anything. Then, when his father had revealed his affair, church lost the little meaning it had held. If his father, who claimed to be a Christian, could do that, then maybe Chance wanted nothing to do with the church. Once he joined the military, there was no one to even drag him to the building anymore. The men in his dorms had been young and single and much more interested in meeting up for beers than meeting up for church. You're right, I was. Or maybe more accurately, I'm not sure I really was a believer until a few months ago. Merribeth pursed her lips together as her eyes studied his face. What happened a few months ago? He took a deep breath as he remembered vividly the night he had given his life to God. Really and truly given it to him. It had been the night he'd woken with cold sweats from flashbacks of the explosion and a throbbing pain in his leg from thrashing in the bed. The sheets had been wound around him so tightly that he'd fallen out of bed trying to untangle himself. Hitting the floor had not only been the lowest point in his bedroom, but also the lowest point in his life. He hated himself for surviving, hated himself for being injured, and hated himself for not being able to do the job he'd once done. Somehow, in the depths of the pain and self-loathing, a conversation he'd once had with Israel entered his mind. They'd been sitting in the barracks with their shirts off due to the oppressing heat, and Chance had asked him about his many religious tattoos. Why do you have so many crosses and Bible verses tattooed on you? Israel smiled and leaned back. In this country, you have always had freedom, but where I come from, it was different. There was always violence and war. When the noise would start, my mama would take us into a closet, and she would pray. People have asked me how I know God is real, and I tell them I know He is real because I felt Him there in that closet, every time my mama prayed. And we would go to church when we could. Even church wasn't always safe, but I always felt safe inside that building. I knew God would go with me anywhere, but I wanted these physical reminders so that when I was weak and forgot, I could look down and see His promise to me. Chance had brushed the words off as part of Israel's personality. The man did nothing halfway, so it made sense his religion would be the same way. But they hadn't settled on Chance at the time. However, as he had lain on the floor, broken and in pain, they had made sense then, and he had asked God to show him the same peace that Israel always carried. Perhaps he had accepted God into his heart when he was younger, but he certainly hadn't understood what that meant until that night. Let's just say God got a hold of me. I finally understand that passage about Jacob wrestling with God. Merribeth's eyes perused his face, as if she was reading the past 8 years on his face. And maybe she was. She was discerning, and he had no idea what his expression was saying. Why did you really leave, Chance? This time, his breath came out as a loud sigh. He had known this question would come up sooner or later. He just hoped she would accept his answer. Honestly, because I was scared. My dad's affair really rocked me. I wasn't lying about that. But mostly, I was scared that I would do the same thing to you. I knew I was like him in a lot of ways, and I was scared that I would hurt you the way he hurt me, the way he hurt my mother. I told myself I was doing what was best for both of us, but I was just being scared and selfish. She took a bite of her sandwich and chewed, but he knew she was just taking time to formulate her thoughts. It was a habit that carried over from high school. She had always been the type to think before she spoke, so much so that she often lost her chance at a witty comeback, something she had vented to him often about. He tried to remain patient and took a bite of his own sandwich. Of course, she chose that minute to finish chewing and pose her question. So, what changed? He held up a finger while he swallowed his own bite. I haven't told you why I'm not still in the military, have I? Merribeth shook her head. It's not by choice. At least it wasn't at first. A few months ago, our tank hit an IED. All of the men were killed except myself and one other guy." Her eyes widened as her hand flew to her mouth. "Chance, I'm so sorry. Is that why you're home?" Chance bit the inside of his lip. He hadn't wanted to tell her about his injury this morning, but now that it was front and center of the conversation, he couldn't really avoid it without lying to her, and he wasn't going to do that. Not anymore. "No, I was sent back to my base due to an injury. I spent several months working a desk job and going through therapy in the hopes that I'd be able to return to combat. But even after all that, they told me I'd be stuck behind a desk for the rest of my career. When it came time for re-enlistment, I decided not to sign, and since there was nothing for me in North Carolina, I came home." "You're limp this morning." It wasn't a question, but a statement of fact. He nodded. "The shrapnel destroyed some of the muscle in my thigh, and the pain still flares up from time to time. Anyway, it was that experience, the injury and losing my friends, that opened my eyes to what I'd become, and what I was missing. I know I can't take back the years, but I am sorry. I'm sorry for letting fear win and leaving you here." He wasn't sure what he expected her reaction to be, but he was wholly unprepared for her to simply nod and return to eating. What exactly did that mean?